I'm Mr. Ma, your teacher for the semester. I could have let you gone through the intro materials by yourself and see how you made out with just reading through the materials and the course outlines and what have you, but I thought I'd make a little video to give you a little bit of FaceTime, right, with your instructor to get a sense of who he is. I should probably give you a little bit of background as to where I'm coming from. I've taught philosophy for probably a good 7 or 8 years now in the Durham District School Board. I started actually teaching over at J. Clark Richardson, now at Donald A. Wilson Secondary School. Before that, I was actually a math teacher over at Dunbarton High School for a while. I have taught other subject areas. My honors specialist is actually in English, and I teach technology actually here at Donald A. Wilson Secondary School as well. I teach three-dimensional modeling and CAD design, that sort of thing. But philosophy is always something that has been something I've taught for quite a number of years. And the reason why I teach it is actually because I want to. All right, it's my actual subject area. I graduated from Mount Allison University way back in the day, and I think it was way back in the mid-90s. And my degree was actually in philosophy and English. I did a joint honors degree there. And so I've been doing philosophy for a very, very long time now. And when the opportunity arose to be able to teach it as a high school subject, I really jumped at it. And it gives me an opportunity to practice basically what I did as a degree. When I did my degree, I did my senior honors thesis with the subject area of philosophy of mind, where basically I was looking at visual cognition systems and basically trying to answer the question of how it is that things that we see actually become those images and such in our heads. There tends to be a little bit of a black box in between, right? We can explain all the physics between, things that we see, like, light bouncing off of objects and getting, into our eyes through the pupils and through all the aqueous fluids, and then suddenly hitting the retina at the back of our eye and then being translated into electrical signals which travel up the optic nerve into our brains, and then suddenly, somehow, it becomes a picture in our head. And that's just something that the sort of physical mechanics can't seem to explain, and so that's really where philosophy kind of takes over in the subject area of philosophy of mind, and that's what I did my studies in. But that's basically where my philosophical background comes from. It's my first time running an online course. I'm looking forward to it. It should be interesting. Normally when I teach a philosophy course, it is in class, and a lot of it is very heavy discussion-based material. So this is new to me. But I think with a new adventure comes some exciting new things. And I'm looking forward to hearing from a lot of you in this course as we go through the semester. A couple of words of warning with the course. Even though we're running it online, I am going to treat it somewhat like I do my normal in-class routine. So there are going to be a few expectations that I'm going to be expecting you to adhere to. And one of those is going to be your assignment deadlines. Your assignment deadlines, more particularly even in this online course, are going to be quite stringent. Because there are going to be dates that I have to set to the assignments that are going to be due dates electronically. As a more practical matter for your assignments, I mark them quick. That's going to be part of the scheme of how this course runs. One of the things that I've noticed over the years teaching this course is that your writing is the surest sign that you're actually learning the material. That's how I get a good gauge as to whether you're learning the material well, whether you're reading and processing that material well, and whether the discussions are actually sinking in with your processing of the material. And so the essay pieces that you write for me are going to be vital to your evaluation. In fact, it is worth 25% of your final mark. And so there's a heavy emphasis on it. And you'll be doing a lot of writing. And that's the unfortunate thing. Well, fortunate in that it's good for you. Unfortunate in that it's going to be a lot of work. But I have set up a sort of structure that works. I've done this for a number of years, and in fact I find it's most helpful. In fact, even past students in years gone by have always said that the scheme that I run by has been the most help for them in preparing for university, which is another goal of this course, I find. Is what I think we should aim for. So the scheme is this, how it's going to run. We're going to do basically an essay every 2 weeks. Your first essay that you're going to do for me, your first essay assignment, is going to be a 1 week turnaround time. But then thereafter, every other assignment is going to be every 2 weeks. Now, in order for you to have 2 weeks to work on material, I've split up your class into 2 groups. There'll be group 1 and group 2. And I thought, the video presentation might be good for this as well, because explaining it on paper or online is probably a little bit more difficult to understand. So let me run through the scheme, and hopefully this will make sense to you. The 2 groups are actually going to leapfrog. Alright, so what's going to happen is group 1, you're going to get your first assignment on the very first day. So as you look online right now, you'll see that assignment 1 is the Plato assignment, and you'll be answering that in essay form and responding to that for a due date next week. And so what's going to happen is you're going to turn in that assignment on that next week, and I'm going to mark it. Alright, group 1, this comprises half of the class, so it's about 15 students, and it's a reasonable time frame for me to actually mark all those essays and actually get them back to you for the following week. That's how quick my turnaround time is. And what will happen is the second group, group 2, will actually get their assignment the week right after. Okay, and so what will happen is they'll get their assignment for the next week, and then thereafter what's going to happen is you'll leapfrog each other every couple of weeks. So group 1, your assignment due date will be next week for this first assignment, and then you'll get your next assignment immediately afterwards. As soon as I return that first assignment, you'll have 2 weeks to do it, and what will happen is after you turn it in, after that 2 weeks, I will turn that essay around to you the week after, and then of course you'll be able to take that feedback from that assignment and work on it for the next assignment. So hopefully that'll work out well for you, and you'll kind of get a handle on that scheme. What it does is it's just sort of something practical for me. I'm able to actually turn around your essays very quickly, and then what you can do is use that feedback as formative feedback for your next essay assignment, which will be your sort of summative mark. And then the other group will again sort of get the same scheme, except what will happen is I cut my marking in half, which is kind of practical in order for me to give you feedback quickly, but also it affords you a little bit more time. Used to be, when I taught this course at first, I was trying to do an essay every week with students, and that didn't work out quite so well, because what happened was I had 30 essays to mark every week, and that just became impossible, and you didn't get your feedback quite quickly enough, and it just became kind of a nightmare. So, I figured out this leapfrog scheme, and tried it out, a few years ago, and it's worked well ever since in my in-class runs of the course. So I'm going to try it here on the online version of the course, and hopefully it'll work just the same. So when you actually see your assignments, you're going to see that they're actually marked or tagged right next to it, group 1 or group 2. So those of you that are assigned to group 1, you're going to be responsible for the essays that are actually tagged for group 1. Those of you that are in group 2 will be responsible for the essays that are actually tagged and marked for group 2. You will all be responsible for doing the reading for everyone. Alright, so while, say for instance, group 1 is working on an essay for specifically a topic around Plato, doesn't mean that the second half of the group doesn't need to touch it or look at it. In order for you to participate in the class discussions and get a full sense of how the course is going to the full extent of the course materials, you're going to need to actually read that material that group 1 is actually writing an essay about. So the reading material, everyone's responsible for, but when it comes to the essays, if it's marked for group 1, that's the essay that group 1 will work on. If it's marked for group 2, that's the essay that group 2 will work on, but you will read each other's materials so that, again, you can participate in the discussion and help your classmates out in, writing their essays, basically. So if we're all talking about Plato, all 29 of us in the class, even though only 15 are actually writing an essay about Plato, your classmates, right, the other 15 that aren't writing about Plato, are going to have input and interpretation about Plato that might help those people that are actually writing the essays, and it'll work both ways for either group. Now, if I actually mark an assignment for a whole class, that means everyone should be doing it. And so I'll try to make sure that I put those taglines in every time we have an assignment pop up. Some other things that I normally run through on that first day, realizing that your content material for this course is actually quite heavy. All right. In fact, this is probably one of the most difficult courses you are going to take in your high school careers. The reading material deals with concepts that are abstract and require a lot of consideration. And so unlike some of your other more practical high school courses where you can kind of point to things in the world and be able to, make connections between them. Not to say you can't make connections between the course content that we have and what happens in the real world. You're going to have to realize that the connections are a lot trickier. And so when it comes to the context of the material, it's going to be probably something you're going to have to work with. The reading material that you're going to be assigned are primary works. A lot of other philosophy courses will sometimes do philosophy about philosophy, which doesn't really get you anywhere if you're planning on taking any future courses in philosophy. And so we deal with a lot of primary works. Some of it's older, some of it more contemporary, but in either case, you're going to be working with probably the most complex material that you've ever seen. And so if you can start doing this at this level, all right, in grade 12, it'll definitely prepare you for that first year course if you happen to take a philosophy course in first year. In fact, a lot of students that do come back to me in first year after taking a philosophy course, they come back and they say, hey, Mr. Ma, you're right. I mean, that's what we're doing here in our first year. The difference between what happens in this course and what happens with anything you take in university is going to be really a matter of how hard I mark. I realize that you're in high school and that you're doing this course online even. And so the marking that you are going to receive from me, the grading that I'm going to be doing, is going to be a lot easier than, say, the university professor is going to grade you in first year. But the thing is if you can get a hold of the sort of scheme of working through that material here in this high school course, when you see this material again in your first year university course, you are going to find it that much easier to actually work with. And that's no lie. That's something that is repeatedly told to me from year after year when I see students come back to me again and again, realizing that the material is no different. And in fact, even when you work through the material here in our high school course, you're going to realize that if you take a course again in first year and you're working with the same material, that it's actually going to be different. Like the interpretation that you make is going to be different. In fact, the professors that you're going to talk to will interpret that work differently than even I do, or we do as a class here. So realize that these are living works. While they may have been written many, many years ago, people are still trying to make good sense of them and apply them to new situations and so on in our world today. So that's the second thing to watch out for. All right. Something else that you will want to get attuned to as well in this high school course for our philosophy course is the concept of defining things. All right. It's really what our course is going to be about. I always liken philosophy not to some sort of personal self-help kind of garbage that you might see. And I always say that lightly because, you know, you walk into a bookstore, for instance, and you look through their philosophy section, and what you'll see is a whole row of, you know, books on, you know, how to, you know, fix yourself, and how to, you know, how all these sort of self-help books. And that's not really philosophy. In a, you know, loose sort of way, it's philosophy, but, you know, really it's not about you. This philosophy course is not a socialization course or anything of that nature. Really what philosophy is about defining those problems that we see in the world around us, defining what the world is around us. And so that's why I always oftentimes, you know, quip, you know, as people ask me what philosophy is all about, and I say, well, what we try to do is we define the world, right? We define the problems. We never answer problems, we define problems. That's really what we're all about. Answers are secondary. Right? Answers come after we've figured out what the problem really is. And that takes a lot of work. Right? And a lot of the philosophy that we're going to be working our way through, the majority of it is a philosopher trying to define a problem, trying to define the problems of the world. You know, we can't solve problems if we don't know what the problems are. One of those jokes that we oftentimes have in philosophy is about subject areas, right? Many of you take different subjects and different subject areas, and you have to realize they all come from philosophy. Philosophy is the first subject. Without philosophy, there are no other subjects that you study. You know, we talk about, say, for instance, mathematics might be a little bit different, but, you know, every other subject's pretty much, you know, stem from philosophy. When you talk about, say, for instance, you're studying social science, right? You're studying some social studies, some history, or, you know, economics, or that sort of thing. All of these all came from, you know, basic philosophical questions, right? Some of you might be physics nuts, right? And you study physics. Well, physics comes from those questions that we ask as philosophers, right? Why is the sky blue? Right? Well, the sky is blue because, you know, light refracts in certain ways through materials and so on and so forth, and those wavelengths that actually get through to our retinas and the back of our eyes translate to electrical signals, and it becomes a blue color to us, right? Well, the thing is without that question of why is the sky blue, that whole subject area of optics and physics doesn't exist, right? And so what we try to do in philosophy is we try to define the nature of the world around us. And that's also what makes it the most difficult subject, right, to grasp a hold of, is that we're venturing oftentimes into new areas. We're venturing into areas that we've never really set foot in before, we've never really considered or thought about, we've kind of taken for granted. And that's problematic. Whenever we take something for granted, that's always problematic. Think of all the trouble you get into when you're younger, right? You just make an assumption and suddenly you stick your foot in your mouth, right? And that's what happens in the world around us today. Without defining problems properly, without defining that world around us, we make assumptions, and that's where we get into trouble sometimes. And so philosophy really is about that. It's about establishing how we understand the world around us, what is the world around us, and everything that goes along with that. There's a number of different subject areas in philosophy that we're going to be touching upon. The course requirements by the ministry standards, just simply say to take 4 subject areas or 3 subject areas out of the realm of different philosophical areas of study. We're going to touch upon 3 or 4 of those areas, all right? Mostly we're going to touch upon the areas of logic. We're going to look at metaphysics, we're going to look at some epistemology, and hopefully we'll tie in a little bit of ethics in there. We may look into a little bit of philosophy of science, a little bit of social political philosophy, maybe we can tie some of that stuff in, and maybe philosophy of mind. But we'll see how the course goes. All right. This will be somewhat of a dynamic course. I haven't set everything in stone. If there's stuff that you're interested in, bring that into the discussion, right? And that's really what will help bring out some of those subject areas you might be interested in as well. Probably the last thing I'm going to mention before I kind of sign off on this little sort of video introduction is the idea of class discussion. In an in-class situation, class discussion is something that, well, I can very easily see. Right? I look around the room, I see, you know, the student, the other student, and, you know, they're participating in the discussion. Then I see Joe Blow in the back that's not doing anything, and then so-and-so that doesn't show up to class, and what have you. And very easily that impacts what I get as written work. Right? If you're not there to participate in the discussions, it shows very clearly through the essay work that those students would actually turn in. Now, in this online situation, I don't have that luxury of being able to, you know, sort of look around the room and see who's participating, who's not, and sort of gauge from that respect. In fact, your online course, you know, I'll be able to see your attendance and I'll be able to see what you post as discussion. However, what's going to happen is I'm not going to be able to tell one way or another necessarily who's actually doing the posting. Like, you know, you could have some professor from university coming in to do your postings for you. I'd never know. And, you know, even your assignment submissions and that sort of thing. So it's going to be a little bit more difficult for me to gauge that way. You will have a written final exam that will be written in your school, I believe, supervised or proctored by a teacher from your school. So you are going to have to know your stuff at some point. However, when it comes to the daily grind, I'm going to be judging that just based on what I see in your classroom discussions as you're posting on the discussion boards. So it's vital. It's vital that you actually participate. All right. I can't stress that enough. In a classroom situation, I can very easily see when I look out in the room. In the online situation, I have to rely on what you write down for your posts. So please make sure that you are putting that time and effort in as stressed in your orientation course with participation. You should be spending at least that 74-minute period, right, of your day that's scheduled for your online class online. Whether you actually take it, you know, during the school time when you're in school to log on and participate, that's kind of up to you. I mean, you could be taking that 74 minutes in the evening when it's more convenient for you after supper or something like that. It doesn't really matter to me the time at which you sign on and start doing some of that work. But you should be making that time commitment day by day, at least for a good hour or two, to do some of that reading and to be participating in the classroom discussions. If you are not participating in the classroom discussions, you know, and somebody else isn't participating and so on and so forth, suddenly that discussion board dries up and really we have nothing useful out of that discussion board. What will come out of the discussion board as people are participating, like you and your classmates and so on, as you're sort of commenting on each other's stuff, as you're posting your own thoughts and materials and opinions, you start to use that discussion. And that's something that point to in the writing tips that you're going to read about for philosophy assignments, that you should be incorporating examples and that sort of thing to help explain your thoughts and your ideas and your opinions. Using that class discussion where somebody might have said, oh, well, you know, here's how this works. Using their examples is perfectly fine, I think. In fact, that's what will help drive your papers. That's what's going to help drive your own understanding of the material as well. Even sort of posting on the discussion board your own thoughts and ideas or how you interpret something is going to be very useful because you get to talk it out. In a classroom situation, you're able to, you know, talk things out and then hopefully it processes and you're just going to use it and, you know, file it away in the back of your head and start using it when you're writing your essays and such. When you're in that online course and you're kind of faceless and, you know, there's no voices being heard necessarily, we depend on the discussion board, your written work, to actually document and force you to sort of think things out. So please make sure you're participating in the discussion boards regularly. In fact, what I'm thinking about as a scheme is we'll have basically a discussion board set up for each topic that we discuss in a unit. and we'll sort of, I'll put a topic sentence or topic question up there, and we'll sort of start, seeing what your thoughts and ideas are about it and how you interpret the works and apply it in that discussion board. The discussion boards are all being set up where you will have to post initially before you can see other posts. This is to force you to think about your own opinions, sort of own interpretations of the work that you're encountering, and that way you kind of go into that discussion board unbiased at the beginning. Once you make your first post, it should unlock all the rest of the posts that everyone else is making, and then you can actually start commenting on each other's work and that sort of thing. If you have nothing to offer at the beginning, then you're kind of at a loss. And so I've done that purposely to force you to actually do some of your own thinking, rather than, if I just left the discussion board open and people just started posting stuff, and then you can say, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and you kind of just reformulate stuff that other people have said. It doesn't necessarily force you to think about it, and that's part of what this course is going to be about as well, is you doing some actual heavy thinking. So make sure that you're participating in those discussion boards. In fact, the discussion board postings, they're worth 25% of the final mark as well. So it's an even split between the essays and the discussion boards, because I think those are two vital parts of you actually being successful in this course and actually learning and demonstrating that you're learning the material. So that makes up the 50% of the term mark. The other 20% of your term mark is all going to be based on your testing. Every unit we're going to have a test. Basically, it's just a way for me to gauge whether you're able to comprehend all of the material that we've been discussing, whether you're able to whether you've been processing it or not, and whether you're able to sort of encapsulate it into some basic factual work. So every unit we'll try to work in a test at the end, and that'll be an even split as well. No unit test is going to be worth more than another unit test, and that'll make up the other sort of 20% of the 70% term work, all right, that you do. The last 30% will be a seminar presentation. We'll work out the details of how I want you to do that presentation a little later on in the course. Basically, it'll all be sort of discussion board based and such as well, where actually you'll be sort of the driver of that discussion board and so on. But again, we'll work out those details as we get closer. The other 20%, the final 20%, is going to be your final exam. This will be again proctored in your own home school, I believe, where another teacher will be supervising your final exam, and then of course that'll be factored in for that last bit of your summative mark. That should take us right up to the end of the course there. If you have any questions, concerns, all right, I've already seen that some of you have participated in the orientation course and you've messaged me or used the pager to get a hold of me. I encourage you to continue doing so. Any little thing that you have course mechanics wise, definitely give me a shout. Because that way hopefully I can resolve any problems or questions you might have quickly, immediately. If it's something with regards to the content of the course, like if it's something that is, addressing the topics of the discussion, leave those for the discussion board. But if it's something like you had a question about how to approach the essay topic, or, you're not sure when a date happens to be, you're not clear about instructions, then give me the little email or pager message and I'll get back to you as soon as I possibly can. It might take me somewhere between 24 48 hours to get a hold of you, but the turnaround time should be quick. I will be checking every day, but just to give myself a little bit of leeway and make sure that I do get back to you. I'm going to put that sort of time lag there between immediate and 48 hours. I'll definitely not leave it longer than that, usually, for a response for you. Okay? Other questions or concerns, if you really need to get a hold of me immediately, you can reach me at my home school, which is Donald A. Wilson Secondary School. The phone number is 905-665-5057. At extension 374. you can just leave me a voicemail message, and I'll return your call as quickly as I possibly can. Barring that, you can always try to get a hold of your guidance counselor, to get the guidance counselor here to get a hold of me, and we can run it that way as well. So there's a whole host of options you can use to get a hold of me, but probably the quickest and easiest is make sure you're using the email facility on the e-learning site. Okay. So I'll leave it at that. This probably won't be my only video, lesson for you, I guess, for lack of a better term. I'll try to do these periodically. Sometimes I know for some people it helps to actually see a face and hear a voice rather than just trying to do some reading and writing and such. So, if this helps, great. I'll hopefully be able to continue doing it every now and again. But we'll run it that way. Okay? So good luck with the course. I'm looking forward to seeing your participation with the material and such, and looking forward to some great discussion. So signing off at this point, Mr. Ma, your instructor for the semester, and we'll see you soon.